Hello, welcome to Garibaldi Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live. We're with you on Boxing Day to reflect on Forest's brilliant performance away at Newcastle at St James's Park, and Forest win 3-1, a Chris Wood hat-trick, things you never thought you might see, especially on Boxing Day. It really is a Christmas miracle. I've even got the Christmas jumper on because I am feeling very festive at the minute. It's the first win for Forest in 51 days, and it ends that awful away form as well. And, of course, the winless run we were on in 14 games. Joining me to discuss all of that and more is a very festive Mark below us. Mark, you do a bit of Forest podcasting. You're a familiar face, and yeah, you're coming to us from America today. Thanks for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here. Yeah, I'm coming to you from snowy Colorado. We have a white Christmas, so fantastic.
Very nice. I like the Christmas jumper as well.
Thank you so much. Look at that. It's about as ugly as it can get, but it is Christmassy. So
you've always and someone without a Christmas jumper in the top corner is Max. Max Scott, Forest fan and broadcaster. Max, good to chat to you. Disappointed with your lack of Christmas jumper though.
Yeah, I feel like I've let the boys down here. So if we do it in a year's time, then don't worry, I'll be there.
Good. And of course, this is pre-recorded. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. We're gonna read a few tweets out as well that people have been tweeting us on Garibaldi Red _ with their thoughts on the game. So Forest win 3-1, a Chris Wood hat-trick. It doesn't really get much better than that. Max, let's start with you. What did you make of the game? Kind of watching it on the TV, kind of a bit of a nervy start, but Forest really grew into the game. Clive Tilsey said that actually on the coverage, that kind of as the game went on, the Forest players got better, and you could really sense that as well. And obviously 3 goals kind of show that as well.
I mean, my immediate reaction is that it's just a massive relief, regardless of what side of the Cooper argument people fall on. Ultimately, what we needed Nuno to do is to try to stop the rot. And the game against Bournemouth was sort of clouded with controversy, and it was just great today to finally get the win, and particularly away. I think you're absolutely right. I thought defensively we looked incredibly nervous and tentative, but as the game grew on, you could see the confidence flowing again, and it's the first time we've seen that since the Villa game, which was a long time ago in football. So massive relief. I think there's so many positives. A Chris Wood hat-trick. I mean, who'd have thought that he could do that and dink the ball over the keeper? Absolutely class. And it's just a massive relief. And again, regardless of how people feel about Cooper leaving, Nuno has done what he needed to do, really, and he's done it in really impressive form, I think, with the players that he used, the rotations that he had, and doing it away from home at St James's Park, which isn't an easy place to go.
No, it isn't an easy place to go at all. He made 6 changes for Forest as well. Montiel coming in, as well as Ola Anya, Hudson-Odoi, and Joe Worrell, of course, just to name a few that made a return to the bench after the recent controversy surrounding him. Mark, just kind of touching on what Max said there, kind of really well-structured Forest performance. And that is the difference for me in the past few games, and of course since Nuno's arrival, just 2 games now. But in a game against Bournemouth that was filled with controversy and Forest down to 10 men, we still managed to score 2 goals from open play. We've scored 3 today. Chris Wood's got a hat-trick, and things all of a sudden look very rosy, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And I think a few things have happened here. I mean, first off, Chris Wood, just a phenomenal performance from our New Zealander. As Mac mentioned, that second goal, Lord of the Dinks, right, from New Zealand. So fair play to him. But a few things have happened here. I think you're seeing the players re-energize because you have that new manager bounce. There's no doubt that's happening. Players contesting spots in the team. We hear continuously that the squad is too big. That's, I'm sure, a message that the players have picked up on. So everybody really is fighting for their livelihood. You see the change in formation, of course, but I think for me, the thing that's most fundamentally different, Max, and goes to your point about the goals we're scoring, is the repositioning of Morgan Gibbs-White. I think wherever you are on the Steve Cooper conversation, and I think most people were pro-Cooper, didn't want to see him go, even those that did, still pro-Cooper. But I think one thing we could all agree on, regardless of what side of that argument you're on, was that Morgan Gibbs-White wasn't being played in the right position. I'm not blaming Cooper for that. He was trying to accommodate a lot of different players, and it forced Morgan Gibbs-White out wide. Where he is now and the impact we're seeing him have on our offensive output, it's night and day.
Yeah, it is. Morgan Gibbs-White, of course, playing in the middle, and then he had Hudson-Odoi on the left, and then Elanga on the right, and then Chris Wood just in front. And that kind of final third of the attack for Forest, Max, kind of picking up on what the media have been saying and kind of all the pundits since the result this afternoon, is that it was just very, very different, and it gave Forest a lot of options going forward. You know, there was times when Elanga maybe should have had better decision making. You know, you look at that chance really in the first half to get Forest level, he didn't. But then he made the right decision when Morgan kind of found that space and played it into him. And then Chris Wood gets his first and eventually the equaliser for Forest just before half time. And that's what happened. Forest had something different today. And for me, in the final third, just looked really different, and it was a breath of fresh air to see that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's no real argument about Morgan Gibbs-White, is there? He needs to play in that position. He's incredibly dynamic. His work rate really sets the standard, and he makes Forest tick because he's just fantastic in tight spaces and can make chances out of nowhere. So I don't think there's any Forest fan out there that would disagree that Morgan Gibbs-White is finally playing in his natural position. And you also have two quite sort of raw talents in Hudson-Odoi and Elanga. We're better for having an Anthony Elanga on the pitch. His pace is devastating. But if his final ball, if he was more decisive and slightly more, you know, you could say cultured in the final third, that today would have been massively different. It would have been more than 3 because we really played to our strengths. You know, I think particularly in the second half, we were absolutely solid. And then we were able to break with this sort of dynamism of Morgan Gibbs-White and the pace and skill of Elanga and Hudson-Odoi. Once Elanga gets that right, then I really think he's then filled Brennan Johnson's boots a little bit. And you can see why United let him go. There's no, you know, his pace is devastating, but he's unable to make the right decisions all the time. But I'm sure that will come. He seems like an incredibly coachable player. You know, and I know that he's sort of really highly rated at international level as well. And so lots of positives. It's bizarre to think that we've beaten the team 3-1 away and it could have been more. But here we are, 3 points later, looking at the positives. And it's amazing what a win can do. You know, it was such a understandably toxic atmosphere after that loss to Bournemouth because all of the Cooper stuff that preceded it, the nature of the refereeing performance, how easily we conceded goals. But it's just what we needed. We needed to be able to get through that first half, even though we looked a little bit nervous. And then we just sort of, it was that exponential improvement in that second half. And it's just a massive relief, boys. I'm just so relieved about it.
Max, can I just pick up on something that,
of course,
the other Max said there very, very quickly about Morgan Gibbs-White, and you name checked Elanga, and you name checked Brennan Johnson, kind of in the same breath there. And I think that's important. I think there was some frustration on occasion around what Jono was delivering. And I think Morgan Gibbs-White joining the team elevated Johnson. It helped Johnson become a better player. I think we're seeing some of the same thing happening with Elanga. If you look at that ball, you talked about Elanga's decision-making on the first instance where he didn't pass to Wood for the tap-in. And then on the second occasion, he did. If you look at the ball that MGW plays him, he actually plays it in front of him to such an extent that he kind of takes the decision-making out of it. Like all Elanga could do at that point was cut the ball back, right? He didn't put it into his feet where he could have taken a shot. He kind of put him in a position where he's like, look, I'm going to put the ball exactly where it needs to be so you do the right thing with it next. And I think Morgan Gibbs-White, in addition to being a fantastic player in and of himself, he's starting to elevate those around him.
Yeah,
he is, and it's a positive time probably to see Morgan in a Forest shirt. And of course, Morgan's probably, Max, the most creative player. I'm just kind of trying to think of the Forest squad on a whole, but someone that can really change the game, whether they start or even if he came off the bench. And that's a short period of time that Nuno's obviously played him in the middle, and such a big impact. Kind of how big is that, not only for Morgan, and obviously as Mark was touching on there, how big it is for Forest and him having that influence on other players, but also just on a whole, really, from Nuno making just one little change, how it freed up so much space, so much time for other players today, and resulted in helping Chris Wood get 3 goals at his former club.
Absolutely, and we need that from Morgan, because he, I think, is our marquee player. We might have signs that cost more than him, but he's the person with that is the most full package of a player we've got. I think we all know Morgan could be better in the final third, but he showed that today with that fantastic pass that's just been explained to Elanga, where it's so good, Elanga just needs to cross it and it's a goal. But I also think we've spoken about the players in front of Morgan Gibbs-White. I think the 2 midfielders behind him, particularly Sangare. I think there's another conversation about Danilo. I thought it was really interesting that he was kept on, because he looked to really struggle. He gave the ball away a lot. I quite like that Nuno hasn't sort of pulled him and has trusted him. But I think particularly Sangare, because Morgan Gibbs-White is central and he's sort of orchestrating things going forward, Sangare looked a little bit more comfortable today. It's really frustrating that he got that yellow card, particularly how little he's played this season. It would have been nice if that's what Nuno wants, to see him play a run of games. So that interruption is going to be frustrating. But I think he helped the players behind him, because they have to do less if he's just in front of them orchestrating things. And so you can see, and it's a relief for me as well, that Nuno clearly sees him as, the man. I think there was a slight worry that because it didn't quite work out when he was a teenager at Wolves, that he might ignore Morgan Gibbs-White. That's clearly not the case. So he's the cornerstone, really, I think, for Forest, not just going forward, but all over the pitch, because his work, he plays like a fan on the pitch. If I was talented enough, I'd be running like Morgan Gibbs-White, or Ryan Yates when he's on the pitch. And I love that sort of how determined he is, and that dogged sort of attitude he's got. And I think that really helps when you're playing away at St. James's Park and you've got a player that's going at giving Guimaraes what Guimaraes gives everybody else. I love to see it.
You never know, Max. You might get a call up from Nuno one day.
Fantastic.
Let's go. Yeah, sorry, mate. Let's go to Twitter and see what a lot of fans said. Jive Coach tweeted Garibaldi Red and said that trust in each other wasn't there in the first half. Second half it was. Turner still looks uncertain in his decision making. I wish he'd commit and come out strong for the balls he goes for. Callum Hudson-Odoi made some good noise. Impressed. Much needed win going into Saturday at home. Adrian says it just proves that Steve Cooper had run out of ideas. If this team could play football, they can keep the ball, they can control the game if they are allowed to. That's an interesting point. Let's pick up on that. That Adrian says, Mark, is this, do you think, Nuno coming in from the past 2 games, he's had a week and a half, less than that, with the Forest players to get his ideas across on the training ground? Morgan Gibbs-White talked about in his interview with the TV cameras that he's tried to help the boys understand how Nuno wants to play, obviously working with him in the past at Wolves. Do you think this is a new manager bounce? Do you think this is Nuno getting his ideas across? And as Adrian maybe says there, almost the handbrake being taken off, whereas with Cooper, it could have been a different story today?
You read my mind using that phrase, new manager bounce, right? We often talk about the new manager bounce as it relates to the players. Now, how does it relate to the manager? You think about the stress and the pressure that Cooper was under. His job was perpetually in jeopardy, and then it wasn't, and then it was again, and then I can't remember the exact time frame, but Brian Clough said something along the lines of, do all your dirty work, do everything you want to do, put everything in place, put your mark on the club within the first 30 days, because you're not getting fired, right? You've been hired for a reason. And I think the thing we're seeing with Nuno is he's been very courageous. He's come in, he's changed the structure. He has moved players around and put them in positions in which they're more comfortable. And we have a gung-ho kind of swashbuckling approach to our football now. I mean, it's no accident. We scored 5 goals in the last 2 games. And I think Nuno's going for it. He's laid down a marker very early and said, this is what we want to do. Now, it could have blown up in his face and not come off. It hasn't. Even in the game we lost, it was still a good showing. And I like that. I like seeing that courage from Nuno, and it's certainly emboldening the players as well, particularly in the attacking part of the field.
I think that's quite interesting, Mark, because there were lots of question marks around Nuno's boring football, wasn't there? You know, and I remember him at Wolves and thinking, you know, I didn't watch many Wolves games, but what he did at Wolves was fantastic, getting him to play European football. And it's interesting that hasn't necessarily been the case, even with 10 men against Bournemouth. He took Mangala off and brought Callum Hudson-Odoi. Right. So again, it's another refreshing element to particularly today's performance, is you see players playing to their strengths, or Nuno playing to the players' strengths. So again, it's amazing what a win can do, just to sort of relieve the existential anxiety of being a football fan.
And I think a microcosm of that is, how long as fans have we been talking about the inability to connect with Chris Wood up top? Right? We've just talked about that ad nauseum. You know, we can't make the best of him. He's not right for us because of the way we play. And yet somehow in the space of 2 games, we've been able to make that connection, right? There's that linkage. And it's not just MGW. I mean, look at the 3rd goal today with Murillo sliding through the lines and breaking Wood on a quick counter. I mean, we're finding ways to do it, to be creative. Nuno is definitely being very courageous in his approach. It's good to see.
He is, and Max, do you think, I kind of want to touch on his post match interviews today? If you haven't listened to them, I would 100% recommend anyone that's listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts to go and listen to them after you've finished listening to us. And he touched on Cooper's work and the culture, and what I like is how he's thanking Steve Cooper a lot. You know, the man that got Forest promoted for the first time in 23 years. You know, always will be a legend round the city. That's something he's done, Max, and I really like that respect that he's brought to the club, and now he's talking about kind of building on that culture. But how difficult a job is it for him, do you think? Because he's replacing a manager that was so popular with the fans. But then today, surely results like that would have obviously massively helped.
Yeah, look, he'd be a fool not to credit Steve Cooper, and he'd be a fool not to talk about how amazing our fans are. I mean, I haven't seen anything like this in English football for a long time. In terms of the support that was shown to Steve Cooper. So it's an easy win. I mean, I agree with what he's doing, and I'm not being cynical about it, but he has to do that. But what I do like is that there's clearly, I think just in Nuno's language, he's speaking Evangelos Marinakis' he's singing to his tune, because Marinakis' big thing is, of course, we should appreciate the history and be proud of that, but it's about a new era. And that's where his his standards that are maybe too quick, or his sort of expectancy for success. But that's where that comes from Marinakis, because he's desperate to return Forest to the big time, and he's shown that in his investment. And so clearly you can see that Nuno he's not just thanking Steve Cooper for what he's done, like all of the previous managers have, you know, banged on about Brian Clough. He's also talking about building. And so I think it shows a synergy between manager and ownership, which we've not seen, which has been lacking massively between Marinakis and Cooper. Obviously, you'd expect that 2 games in. But yeah, all the right noises are coming out, Max, and we need that. You know, the worst thing that could happen is for there to be a mutiny within the fan group. And I'm sure Evangelos Marinakis is going to sleep well tonight, knowing that we've gone and done what nobody said we were going to do. You know, watching all of the pre-match stuff, no one gave Forest a chance, and I don't really blame them. But yeah, he's making all the right noises, and he's given fans a reason to believe in him. And if Forest fans believe, they're the best fans out there. But if Forest fans see football in front of them that doesn't work, that doesn't look positive, that's disjointed, then they're gonna be frustrated. So, you know, good on him.
He is. And Mark, how impressed have you been of Nuno, the way he's carried himself in the media, and obviously today's result, and even potentially the way he set us up against Bournemouth, even though he had a few days with us. How impressed have you been with him kind of since he's come in? And do you think now is really the time after this result for Forest to kick on? Man United next Saturday. This is the time for the Nuno era to really begin.
Yeah, it's a great question, Max. And I mean, how can you not be impressed with him? I think you'd have to be a real stick in the mud to not recognise what he's done in just a space of a couple of games. Again, I use the word courageous. I've been really impressed with the way that he's attacked these games, and I think Max mentioned this earlier as well. One of the Maxes, I can't keep the Maxes straight, but one of you talked about the number of changes, right, from last game to this, personnel changes, and in Nuno's post-game interview today with Colin Frey, Colin asked him whether or not that was something that had to happen because you played most of the last game with 10 men. And Nuno indicated, yes, that definitely had an influence on it. But also, I want to get a look at all the boys, right? He keeps talking about the fact that the squad is too big. And so I like what he's doing right here and now. But I also like the mindfulness he has to bring in the other players, to layer them back in, right? Not to do wholesale changes. But to your point, Max, bring Joe Worrell back in, who's been on the fringes for we don't know why, but it's certainly been some contention there. And he's doing a nice job of reintegrating players so he can get a look at them, in advance of January, where he's going to have to make some decisions. I hope seeing some players leave the club, but also bringing in one or two key acquisitions as well. So very impressed with him so far, Max.
That's what I think made the win so impressive, is that he brought in Montiel, brought in Dominguez off the bench, brought in Worrell, which I think was a really brave decision, because Worrell's been getting so much heat online for Forest fans, clearly under a lot of pressure. I thought he performed brilliantly and did what he needed to do when he came on. And that's what's so impressive, is that all of those players that were on the fringes clearly feel energised and confident enough to do that and to see out the win. So I like that it's been a completely fresh start, but that also makes me feel confident that we will get out of this relegation battle, because all of the majority of these players that we've signed are decent players and can, at their best, really compete in the Premier League. And so that's another reason why I feel so, again, relieved, because clearly ingredients to go and do it, right?
Fans bidding off Montiel after a couple of shaky performances, I mean, that was nonsense. You got a World Cup winner there. He's a quality player, and he showed it again today. Sangare's another one, right? Didn't become a bad player overnight. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for what we're seeing early doors.
Yeah.
Try not to get too carried away. Maybe I had one or two too many whiskies yesterday. So, trying to stay on an even keel now.
Nuno actually said that this was a good win and it was exciting, but Forest can build on from this now. We face Man United next week on the 30th. Anthony Elanga's former club. Can I just want to touch on Elanga and forgive me for reading down at my phone as I kind of read these stats. 78% pass accuracy for Elanga today, 41 touches, 5 ball recoveries, 4 ground duels won, 3 key passes, 2 dribbles, 2 big chances created, which led to 2 assists. What a performance from him, kind of, especially in the second half. The Newcastle defence looked really, really scared of him, and kind of watching it on the TV with family, we were kind of just shouting at Elanga to just go on, kind of run at them, and that's exactly what he did, and was able to do that. And the stats don't lie, do they, Max? Kind of just looking at that. What a player he's becoming for Forest, and again, hopefully now beginning to really start thriving under the new era.
I mean, I think he had a really good performance. The stats definitely don't lie, but the stats just make me think how much better that performance could have been. That could have been it could have been 5-6-1 if he'd have got things right. But so I don't doubt that he's been a really good player, and he scored a few goals for us. So good on him. And hopefully it gives him the confidence to have that moment in his mind of clarity in the final third, to be a bit more confident. It was a great performance, Max. But my overwhelming feeling about Elanga still, despite those stats, is, mate, you could have scored 2 goals as well as get 2 assists, but that's exciting because I do think that he's clearly a coachable player. He's come from United's academy that, despite all of their troubles, produce good players. So, he's got good pedigree, and I've got no doubt that he'll get better this season. And Nuno keeps talking about wanting to coach players and improve players. Well, he's going to be, I'm sure, fast-tracked in that process and be really successful this season.
One stat,
agree,
Max, one stat that you did miss on Elanga, which I thought was delicious, is that he's now been involved in 8, contributions to goals or assists, 8 this season, which is more than all of the goal contributions of the front line of another Premier League team. Do you know which one? Manchester United.
Yeah, love it.
Very good.
Well, I think going on to that, Mark, I'm really excited about the Man United game. Not at all that I think it's going to be an easy win, but let's be honest, if you want to play Man United, it's now. A bit like today, if you want to play Newcastle, it's now. They're on a touchy run of form. And I just think if we can start the first 5-10 minutes well, get the City ground roaring, then I really do fancy our chances, because they, like we have recently, really lack a backbone, and I feel like it was so frustrating to lose to them, having gone 2-0 up and throw that away. But hopefully this victory gives us that sort of steeliness at the back and that self-confidence to go ahead and then defend it, because let's be honest, they're really struggling, aren't they? So I'm excited for that fixture.
Yeah, and there's more to come from Callum Hudson-Odoi as well.
Yeah. Definitely. And also living in Manchester, Max, the thought of beating Man United, yes, I'm very excited for that game. But Mark, kind of just kind of touching on that game again, it's a good time to play Man United. It's the 3rd game in this new era, and I promise I will stop using the new era after a few weeks. But this is the right time to play Man United, and as Max said, then with the City ground rocking, with players like Elanga, I mean, can you see Nuno kind of sticking with this side? Don't fix what's not broken, and Steve Cooper found it so hard to find consistency in a starting 11. So surely now, after a win away at Newcastle, a very good side, a top 6 side, albeit not at the moment, then surely kind of Nuno's got to stick with this side going into the Man U game.
I think obviously you got to drop Chris Wood now, put Origi in, but you're going to see Sangare out of the starting lineup, of course, because of the suspension. So you naturally imagine that either Dominguez or Yates are going to step in there. I'd be partial to little Ryan Yates, as he's become the new Premier League #1 S-House.
Absolutely.
This season. Absolutely fantastic. Love how he gets under opposing team players' skin and the fan skin as well. I don't know, Max. I don't know whether or not he'll keep this team. We've seen now, 2 variations, and both have been successful to a certain degree. Obviously, he didn't win that first match, so you might question that a little bit. But I don't know. I think we could see Toffolo come back in. Nico Williams has been, I think, excellent. I think he's been one of our best players of the last few games, quite honestly. He's susceptible to a mistake, but he's come on really, really well, I think, since Steve Cooper reintroduced him a few matches back. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. But I think one thing that Nuno has done now is he's given himself choices, right? He has options. It's not a case now of just kind of whacking down the same 11 and crossing your fingers. There's competition in this squad. And I think off the back of this victory, players are going to be fired up and desperate to play in that next match.
Definitely. Max, just finally to kind of finish us off, I kind of just want to touch on Chris Wood again. Kind of listen to him in his post-match interview. He talked about, that's what he needs to do as a striker, score goals, 5 goals for Forest so far this season. If he can remain fit and if he can remain kind of the way he's been today and being in the right place at the right time, albeit a very good finish. It wasn't a typical kind of trademark Chris Wood finish as well for that third for the chip. But how vital can he be for Forest whilst Taiwo is out? And of course, that will do his confidence the world of good today.
Well, it's massive. That's what we've lacked, isn't it? Someone that can score goals. And Mark said it earlier. I don't necessarily think it's been Chris Wood's fault. He's not been getting any service. That's not to say that Chris Wood's been performing fantastically, but it's everyone else's fault. But now that there is clearly a structure in place to give him service either side and have Morgan Gibbs-White playing in that position, that's going to be massive until Taiwo comes back. And if he keeps scoring goals, then at least Taiwo's got some competition, which he hasn't had. So it's really important he continues scoring goals and that the players around him create those goals. And if that happens, then there's no danger in Forest getting dragged into a relegation battle. So, long may it continue. And hopefully this gives Forest a bit of a blueprint to know how to feed Chris Wood and play to his strengths, because he's not as quick as Taiwo at his fittest. He's not as strong as Taiwo at his fittest, but he knows where to be. And clearly he can finish. So, crack on, boys.
Exactly. Crack on. That will do us nicely. Nice to smile and talk about Forest at Christmas time. Max, thank you for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your Boxing Day, whatever you're up to, mate.
Yeah, and you, mate. And you. It's been great to chat. And, great to chat to you as well, Mark.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Fingers crossed for a Christmas jumper next time, Max.
I'm up to demolishing this and reading this. This is my Boxing Day.
Very nice.
Well, this is mine.
Hey!
Right, boys, it's been
very
great.
good. Very good. Thanks, as always, for tuning in to this instalment of Garibaldi Red. Remember to drop us a like and subscribe and follow across Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. We will see you next time after or before the Man United game, actually. And as Forest win 3-1 away at Newcastle, have a wonderful Chris Wood time. Thanks for tuning in.